The big thing I want to get today is understanding motor skill learning. There's Fitz and Posner have a model of motor skill learning, or when we're trying to learn something new. And their first stage of their motor skill learning is cognitive phase. Cognitive just meaning thinking stage. So the first stage, when we're trying to learn a new skill, we need to see it. What does it look like? And then we need to feel it. This is called kinesthesia, or spatial awareness. So first we see it. Somebody will show you, this is how we do the exercise. Then you got to try it and see how it feels. And then you start performing it, which is called auditioning in their world. And then you need feedback for correction. This is also that wonderful awkward stage, because we're trying to think through, and we haven't even learned the movement yet. So it's also the robotic phase. So it's the awkward phase, or where we're going to feel like a robot. So this is the phase that a lot of people get hung up in, because they do feel robotic or feel awkward. But we need to continue through this phase because we're still learning. So it's important that we understand that we're moving through space, and that requires us to learn the dimensions of time, speed, space, force, flow. So the more complicated the movement is, the longer it takes to improve. So when we start trying to do something, we're moving through space, and we're trying to figure out, how much force do we use? How much movement do we need? How fast do we do it, which is time? And then just trying to get that flow of the movement so it looks smoother. This is a normally occurring thing. And the one I like to point out to and talk about in the book is babies learning to walk. Now, for all of you that have had kids or seen anybody that has kids, this becomes just a momentous occasion when your kid gets ready to even start to take steps. But this isn't the culmination of it. It's actually several weeks before, right, or several months before. The process of learning to walk for us humans starts with sitting up, crawling. Eventually we stand by the couches, and the babies start bouncing. And eventually, when they get to the point where they have enough strength in their legs and balance, they try to start taking a few steps. And as anybody knows that watches a baby trying to learn to walk, they take a few steps and they fall on their behind, and then everybody claps and cheers, and then they get up and try it again, and eventually they start putting it together. But babies also have this walk at first where they're still unbalanced, so they have their arms up trying to balance, and it's only about another year later that the walk begins to look smooth, and we start getting the hands down and then get into the ability to run and learn to run. Well, I point this out because we got to remember our baby elephants too. When we're trying to learn a new activity, our emotional side is in that baby elephant stage. The only difference is when the human baby tries to walk, everybody around them cheers and claps and makes a big deal about it. When we get older, that goes away, and even though our baby, our elephant is still a baby, even our emotional side is still in that baby state of trying to learn something new. The world is now full of critics. So I always wonder what would happen to babies if we treated them like we treat older people. When you try to learn something new, so if this baby was just trying to learn to walk and we criticized it for not doing it right, and we criticized it for not walking smoothly instead of cheering it on, how many babies would go on to walk? And I think that's the effect over here on the baby elephant later in life when we try to learn something new. If you try to learn to dance and you've never danced, if you try to learn to play a musical instrument, and if all you have around you is critics and people that are criticizing you and telling you how poorly you're doing, that baby elephant's not going to take very many more steps. So now we go into, so eventually, if we keep pushing through and we get enough feedback, we move out of the cognitive phase into the associative phase. So this is where we're starting to understand it. We now know, we now begin to comprehend the parts of the movement that are how they relate to each other and how it's supposed to go together. Errors begin to decrease and it begins to feel more automatic, but we're not there yet. We're becoming more biomechanically efficient. So an interesting thing in the human body, when we start exercising, we start doing something, the first thing that increases isn't muscular strength. It's called neuromuscular efficiency, or it's the movement. Our muscles learn how to develop and increase the efficiency they contract the muscles with before we get any changes in the muscle. That's usually about the first 4 to 6 weeks of an exercise program, is that ability to start walking or getting more efficient in the movement. So we just get better at recruiting muscle fiber. And then the nervous system and the muscle system start to refine the movement. You start to get down the speed, the amount of strength needed for the task. So we're starting to put it all together. So the quality practice has produced a gradual refinement of the skill. However, there's still a big need for feedback here because we don't have it totally down yet. So that's why when we're doing exercise, we need that constant feedback so that we can continue to improve and refine the skill. It's a big mistake a lot of people make when they're trying to learn a new motor skill. They'll get to this level and then they think, okay, I've got it down pat. I don't need additional feedback from anybody outside. I'll just figure it out. But we don't have that full sight of what does it look like, and we don't have that reference point to give us the feedback of how to continue to improve. So, and that's because we can't feel when it wasn't quite right. We're getting better, but we haven't experienced what it's like to do it exactly perfectly, so we don't have a reference point. So we need that coach or that outside person helping refine the skill. If you keep going through that, eventually we get autonomous, which just means automatic. So the movements are now automatic and improved and systematic. They're stable, and then they're also effortless. So this is when it starts to get smooth. But even at this level, it's interesting because if you look at this scale, is the 10,000 hour practice rule. This is actually from competitive violinists this was done at a music school, and they were trying to figure out why was it that some students were the best, some were good, and then they compared it to the teachers. And what they went back to is they went back and looked at the cumulative hours of practice, and they found that at early ages there was no real difference in the amount of practice. But at around 10 to 12 years old, the best people that turned out to be the best practiced more. Not a whole lot more, but a little bit more each day. So by the time they got to 18 to 20, they were exponentially higher. Interestingly enough, they also checked the teachers for practice, and they found that the teachers had, if you look at, there are only about 4,000 hours of practice compared to 10,000 hours of practice. There's been a lot written about this 10,000 hour rule in multiple areas, not only in piano, but in sports and in computer programming and pretty much everything across the board. They find out that this is the key, and it actually relates to the 10-year rule. So they're saying basically that 10,000 hours of practice is about 10 years. So in order to become the best at anything, whatever you want it to be, it's going to take you 10 years of practice and deliberate practice. So the other thing they found was that the people that got to the best, when they practiced, this additional practice time was actually at being very diligent in improving the small things, not just the going out and hitting. The classic you hear all the time, or comparison you see, is the people that play golf and go out to the driving range. There's the people that go out and just hit bucket after bucket of balls without actually changing anything. And then there's the people that refine it and work on one thing that day or a couple things and try to perfect one piece of the puzzle, and then have those coaches that help them pinpoint on what's going wrong with the movement so they have that feedback to improve. So that's the 10,000 hour rule. I know it's a scary thing to look at, but like we said, that we know that this is really the key. So the important thing with this is that we understand that it does take the long time to actually learn and continue to grow with what we do. So I just want to do another little quick check here. So where do you feel in your exercise realm? I know a lot of you were in the cognitive phase when we first started, but do you feel like you're still in the cognitive phase, or you feel like you've moved on to the associative phase, or have any of you reached the autonomous phase where it is feeling more like automatic, normal, and dialed in? So I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes there to vote. Okay, well, it looks like everybody's kind of across the board, a little bit of everything. So again, it doesn't really matter where you're at in this motor learning phase, whether you're in the cognitive phase, you're in the associative phase, or you're moving into the autonomic phase where you're starting to blend it in. It's really more about continuing to take those steps and giving yourself a break. I think that's the biggest thing we have, is we lose that sense of understanding that this is a normal cycle. It's very normal for us to continue to move along. So understand that you're there and that you're moving through that. So it's a normal deal. Keep going through it, because that's the way it's supposed to be. Okay, for some reason we're still back on the cognitive stage. Go back and make sure. Let's try that again. Okay, so I had one person still stuck. Is anybody else still stuck on the... Let me look down at the chat. So click on over to the chat. Let me know if you guys are on the right hand. There should be a chat. Let me know if you can see this slide that we're currently on. Or is it still stuck on the one? There we go. All right. So now you should be able to see the slides, right? So let's go back through those real quick, because I guess I got stuck on the cognitive side. So here's the associative stuff as a review. The associative is just beginning to ingrain it in. So the quality practice produces a gradual refinement of the skill. And eventually this is the one we got to on that stage 3, when you get to the autonomous movements. And here's that graph that I was talking about. If you weren't able to see it earlier, hopefully you can see it now. with the hours of practice and how the curve on the top, or the students clearly defined as the best in the school. Then there was the students that were okay or good, and then there was the teachers, and you can see the divergence as it goes up and they separate. So again, that's the power of that deliberate practice as we go along. And then the big thing is, as we've talked about, the only person you are destined to become is the person that you decide to be. And we see now the power of that daily discipline or daily practice of doing this. There's an interesting book called The Slight Edge, where the author talks about this is the same thing that happens in any area of our life where we put our attention to. Just like getting healthy, if somebody does nothing to improve their health and the other person does everything right, they're really not that different on a day-to-day basis when they first start. But by going and doing your exercise, by going and every day eating the right food, you're on an upward trend, and it will start to compound. When you're not, you're actually on a downward trend, and you start getting, your health starts to decline down the other way. So we'll talk about that more when we get down the road, but there is a lot of power, and it's the power of this compounding interest and why we want to do day to day, even though it doesn't seem like a big thing. Do those exercises each day. Make your exercises, follow that meal plan day to day, because you will start to see compounding interest, and you'll start to feel it, but it won't be until down the road, just like any other compounding interest. So make sure we keep going that way. Hopefully you guys caught it. Let me take a quick look. Anybody have any quick questions? Okay, 12:39. Well, with that, I would like to thank you all for hanging in there and attending. Have a good day. Hopefully you now have some idea. The other piece of safety is the technique of the exercise and why we harp so much on doing it the right way. So hopefully this is the first insight to that. We're going to be looking more and more down the road at these different principles and why they're important to making sure you do get healthy and stay healthy. So with that, thank you. Have a great day. Have a healthy day. Get some exercise in, little activity, and eat healthy. And I will talk to you soon.